Please.
Sure.
That's cool.
Maybe. All right, we're on. Anybody else need a pen? Pen? Well, if there's an actual real pen in there. Pen? Anybody need a pen?
I thought I had more than 2 pieces.
What? Pen?
Yeah.
Not talking to myself.
This
Pen?
one's
Here, why don't you hold it, pen?
empty.
Just put it back. That one's empty?
Markers.
Hang on.
Just
Somebody want to give me a pen that works here? You give me one?
Yeah, they
What?
let's
It works.
I don't know.
I don't know what the other one was.
Hey, I'm not here to pick through pens and throw stuff away. I'm here to give a class, and I'm still handing out pens, all right? All right, good morning.
To be shopping.
What?
It needs to be shopping.
It's fine.
Oh yeah, that's right. There's
Yeah.
a singing thing tonight.
Come on in.
Come to the front.
Anything else?
Yeah, come in.
No, I always.
Do you want
Tuesday.
Yep. How was everybody's week? Busy? Yeah, so was mine. I had to go to I haven't gone to a specialized plumbing anything in years, and I had to go to a specialized plumbing class this week. And it was, it was like most classes. Unfortunately, I have the public school model where you memorize and then jump. So I
My
passed,
hair.
but do I remember much now? No. But then half the stuff in my brain wasn't right last week, so it was a fairly intense, but I'm glad everybody had a good week. So, all right, first slide as a reminder always. How does budget and finance build the kingdom, and how does understanding money and budgets help with the spread of the gospel for the individual? First off, does anybody have questions on anything we've gone over thus far? If you recall. No? Okay, I know it's a lot of info. I appreciate everybody's patience, but it is very important info, okay? So, is it important to know how finance and budget and finance builds the kingdom? Absolutely. Yes, Gary?
I have found throughout the CDs and didn't know how the Bible was so important with finances, and it's just amazing that it works that way.
It is, very much so. And, did everybody hear Gary? Yeah. No, scripture is absolutely essential when you're trying to figure out your budget and your finances, and a lot of people forget that. You know, it's like tithe, for instance, and I've heard the joke, and I've said it in here, that a lot of people, they become Christians, and then their wallet becomes a Christian with them about a year later. You know, because they don't think about the fact that that factors in. So, but no, that was a great comment. But hey, absolutely, the Lord is going to get the money wherever He needs it to build the kingdom, right? Shouldn't He get it from the Christian? Shouldn't the Christian be standing there with the hand out? Here it is, right? But they can't do that if they constantly feel like they're in a state of scarcity, like things are never going to get better, because ultimately it comes down to a lack of faith. All right? We're moving on. Okay, so this page right here, very important page. This came off of YouTube, all right, this quote did. It's down at the bottom here, but this is actually Mike Rowe. Everybody who knows who Mike Rowe is, and I like Mike Rowe a lot because he's very straightforward. Came off a series he did called Hot Under the Blue Collar, where he liked to dispel myths. All right, now I do hammer on college a lot in here, and I don't want people to think that I don't like college or that I think college isn't an option. That's not it at all. The reason I hit college so hard in here is because college is being pushed so hard to kids. All right? Is college the only answer to make a living? No. Is college the only answer to wealth? No. Is college the only answer to education? No. But when you look around and you talk to people, what's the number one thing on most kids' minds leaving school right now? Gotta go to college. Gotta go to college.
Big money.
Yeah, these numbers right here. In 30 years, college tuition has increased 1,100%. Now this number at the bottom, this who can tell me what that number is? Right? $1 trillion, right? $1.3 trillion. Okay? So the point here is this isn't just outstanding, like people who haven't paid their student loan debt. This is overall debt for the student loan program. All right, so what does this tell you? Why do you think that the government is pushing college and college grants so hard? Well, not grant loan, we're talking college loans. Why are they pushing student loans so hard?
Modern day slavery.
Well, modern day slavery, yeah. But it's
They make a lot of money.
it's a business, yes. All right. When the government bailed corporations out, what were they really doing? They were investing. They wanted their and they wanted their little hooks into those. That's why when GM took that money, they were then labeled by a lot of people, not literally, but by a lot of people, they were labeled government motors instead of General Motors, okay? All right, so keep those numbers in your head. So today is primarily going to be talking about kids and budgets. Now, as a parent, this will affect you in how you train, and as a kid, it affects you in how you look at what your parents tell you, okay? Or how you think of things yourself. So just because you're young, just because you don't have kids, just because you have kids, nobody gets excluded in this group, all right? So, Deuteronomy 6:9. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Now I find this very similar to John chapter 4. You can go there if you like. John chapter 4 and verse 21. Jesus said to her, Woman, believe me, an hour is coming, when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people the Father seeks to be his worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. Now why, somebody take a stab at it, why does that section of Scripture remind me of Deuteronomy 6? Anybody? I could do the Bueller thing, but I think only a third of you have probably seen that movie. What?
There are pieces to the whole picture, you know. I mean, this is the end result, obviously John being the end result, and Deuteronomy is, you know, kind of how you're getting there, so to speak, what your instruction manual looks like.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good correlation. What I was going for here is in verse 23 it says the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, right? And then in verse 24 it says God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. So when, then, is the Christian not in worship? Now we're not talking about worship per se. I'm just giving you an idea here. When is the Christian not in worship? Christian's always in worship. Always in worship. Now, how does that tie back to Deuteronomy chapter 6? All right, now granted one's Old Testament, one's New Testament, but when you look at it, these words which I am commanding you shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. It's a 24/7 thing, isn't it? Both. So Deuteronomy 6 applies just as much today as it did then. Just because it's Old Testament doesn't mean, you know, that it's not an applicable. That's my big word for the day, applicable. I don't know if any of you are ever familiar with Toastmasters, but they put a word up front, and you get extra points if you use that word.
Is that your points for the week?
That was, yeah. No, that comes, I actually go to Toastmasters.
For the month, yeah.
For the month, yeah. For this class, yes. So anyway, so that is the point there, that when we're talking budget and finance, not only is it our responsibility to teach it to our children if we have children, it's our responsibility to know it ourselves. Because did every parent teach their kid budget and finance? Who in here was taught budget and finance by your parents? Technically. Okay. That's okay. You notice my hand did not go up. I was not taught any budgeting or any financing. I knew what money looked like. I wasn't even entirely sure what a checking account was. When I was asked when I was younger if I had a budget, I literally said, these are word for word, I still remember it. I don't know why it burned in my head then. I said, budgets are for people who have enough money to pay their bills. I don't. That's what I thought. I literally thought budgets were for people who had enough money to pay their bills. That was the level, that was after 18. I was over 18 at that point. That was my idea of budgeting. And I have to wonder how many kids these days have that idea of budgeting, because how many kids these days are bought everything by their parents? Is that teaching your kid to budget? No, that's teaching them that there's a dollar attached to everything. Okay, next slide. Okay, so how does this apply to kids? Insulating and isolating. The whole idea here is how do we insulate and not isolate? But can we do that? Now insulating is to place in a detached situation, whereas isolating is to set apart from others. Now it's important to teach your kids, it's important to train your kids to want to be godly. Okay, because obviously you can't make that choice for them when that time comes. But you can teach them what godly looks like. You can teach them what it means to be set apart from others, correct? But is isolation a fine line? It is, isn't it? I'll be the first to step up and say that not only did we insulate our older kids when they were younger, we isolated them as well. And I was wrong, 100% wrong. And we made a transition as the kids got older into more teaching them to think for themselves, you know, while setting the example. Because I can tell, well, as a dad, I can tell other dads, your kids will be whoever you are, regardless of what you say. Okay? So it was very important for me to be who I wanted the boys to be. Whether they became that man or not, I needed to at least be able to stand before God and say, I did what I could do. I did everything that I thought you were telling me to do. All right? So how do we become our kids' mentors and key advisors? This is a very, very interesting discussion these days, especially. You've got more and more kids who are given things by their parents. More and more kids who their parents do everything for them. Right? How many people in this room, I want to see you raise your hands, know some parent or know a kid whose parents, who know of a family, the situation is the parents do everything for the kids? Okay. Do you? It's okay. You just don't know. You're just not aware that some do. And that's fine. Okay, so is that helpful to the kid? No. Is it helpful to the parent? No. Does it exhaust the parent?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many times have you heard him say, I just don't understand why little Sally is acting that way. Little Sally's acting that way because you're acting that way. Okay? Little Billy's acting that way because Dad acts that way. Okay, you gotta remember that the budget and finance is absolutely essential in helping tie a family together. Okay? Now, yes, we did teach the boys budget and finance. Did I give them all the right tools? No, but I gave them tools. Could I have taught them better? Yeah, I know that now. But I taught them exactly what I knew to teach them then. You know, each one of the boys had to go through the Dave Ramsey class before I would graduate them, because they were homeschooled, obviously. All right? Keegan got off because he has to go through my class, or I won't graduate him. Okay? So, but it has to do with teaching. It has to do with learning. Nobody is going to care as much about your personal situation as you will. Okay? Do you have a question?
What?
Yeah.
I can remember back when the girls were little, I always, you know, they'd want something and I'd say, I can't afford that, we can't afford that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I heard, I don't know, it was on the radio or something, somebody talking, and so I then changed it to, I choose not to buy that right now.
Uh-huh.
Instead of, I can't afford it. Because, you know, because that, I can't afford it, you know, kind of puts a brand on their brain or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So I just started saying, I choose not to spend my money on that right now.
See, and that was very wise, because what you wanted for the girls was not how you wanted.
Yeah.
You know, we as parents, we want our kids to be better and feel better about things than we do, right? But what are you teaching your kids? To feel exactly the same way you do ultimately. But you were correct to make that change, because you didn't want them to grow up with the scarcity mindset that we can't afford it and that things will never get better. So no, that's awesome. So anyway, here's the key. Okay, so how do we become our kids' mentors and key advisors? Well, for one, do we conduct our lives in such a way that our kids want to follow us? Do we conduct ourselves in such a way that other people's kids want to follow our example? I'll pick on Lolita for a second. I mean, she's old enough to have her own career, be on her own, but she is well aware, I'm sure, that other kids will watch. Yes? That other people will watch you and what you're doing. Okay, so it's not just a parent thing. All right? So how do we conduct our lives in such a way that our kids want to follow us or even want us in that capacity? Okay? Do our kids trust us to be their key advisors? Do our kids trust us to be their mentors? Have we conducted ourselves to aspire to that point that our kids should want to? Have we, as single individuals or even young kids, have we looked at other adults? Okay, Scripture says something very important. The tree is known by its fruit, right? So when you're looking for fruit, when you're looking for answers, if your mom and dad don't have the fruit that you're looking for, what are you going to do? You're going to find that fruit somewhere else. It's not always positive fruit, is it? Okay?
Usually negative.
What?
Usually negative.
Usually negative, yes. Does scarcity and abundant mindsets factor into this now? Yeah. Do you have some? Oh, I thought you were. All right, next slide. All right, so then, how do we live within a culture without becoming part of a culture? And are we to be a subculture or a counterculture? Now, I threw Romans 12 in here, 12:2, where it says, "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect." Now, the definition of a subculture is a group within a large group, often having beliefs at variance with those of the larger group. So the indication would be that a subculture lives within the culture and only is a little different. That's kind of the indication that it pushed towards. Now, counterculture was listed as a subculture, although in its definition I don't really think it is, whose values and norms of behavior differ substantially from those of mainstream society, often in opposition to mainstream cultural ideas. So where do you want to land? Where do you want your kids to land? Where do you as an individual, as a single individual, want to land, all right? So how do we live within a culture? Well, you can live within a culture and pay your bills and do everything you need to do without being like everybody around you, okay? If I were to walk into a room full of kids with cell phones, and I said, I need you guys to wait here, say 10 kids, random 10 kids, all right? Let's say half of those kids were in the church and half of those kids were from public school, all right? And none of them knew each other. When I came back, what would be happening?
They'd be on their phones.
They'd all be on their phones. More than likely, all right? We're working on the more than likely, idea. They would more than likely all be on their phones. Could you pick out the kids who were the church kids and the non-church kids from that group at that point? Probably not. Now, why is that? It's all part of the same culture, okay? So do we need to even be concerned about culture? We need to be concerned in as much as it affects our kids or ourselves, okay? When we are counterculture, that simply means that we completely disagree. Now, the indication that I would, or the leaning I would see for some Christians would be to go towards the extremist side at that point. And I don't believe in the extremist side. I don't think it's any more positive than the extreme negative side. All right? It's like we've talked about, all right? You can be prepared without being a prepper. Okay? You can buy silver and gold without hoarding silver and gold. Okay? You can understand why the dollar is getting ready to collapse without centering your entire life around, oh my God, what am I going to do when the dollar collapses? Okay? What's it say? It says worry about today, right? Worry about today. Doesn't mean don't plan, just means worry about what you can affect, what you can worry about. When those things happen, deal with them. All right? So there is a happy place. Okay, and that's what we're talking about, is that happy place. All right, next slide. So the basics. This is what I taught the boys growing up. 70, 10, 10, 10. Very basic. These numbers can be moved. There's nothing in stone here. This is just a basic premise, all right? 70% for spending, 10% for savings, 10% for tithe, and what's the other 10% for? Without my boys saying it.
Fine. Fine.
Nope, that's underspending.
Or just be-
Yep. That's why 70% goes to spending. Anybody?
Retirement?
Huh?
Retirement?
You're close. That's a good guess.
Investment.
Very good. Investment, yes. It was always investment. What did I mean by investment? Well, you wanna make money, that 10% goes to investment so you can buy a lawnmower and mow lawns. Or so that you can buy paint equipment and paint somebody's rooms. Or you kinda see where I'm going there. But the whole idea is to set in motion an idea that says, I can always put this aside. I need to think about that now. Okay? Everybody's retirement plan is different. Should you talk retirement with your kids? Yeah, I think you should. But I don't think you should center their entire mental focus around it. See, we live in a society of extremes right now. Everything is, oh my gosh here, oh my gosh here, oh my gosh here. Where am I gonna throw my oh my gosh today? Doesn't have to be that way. Should I think about retirement? Sure, I should think about retirement. Should I center my entire being around retirement? No. Why? Because I've got bills to pay today. Okay? So, and we get into scarcity when we start thinking, well, I can't have this because I gotta pay for retirement. Okay. There's directions to go, Cody.
I feel like if you're talking about investment, you're talking about retirement. You know, the investments should be based on an end goal, which is retirement or
Passive income.
financial freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. Okay. Allowances. Let's talk allowances for a minute. Who thinks that I believe in allowances
For kids or for yourself?
for kids? We're talking
No.
kids. Huh?
I don't think you believe that.
Okay, no, I do not believe in allowances. Why do I not believe in allowances? Because I don't believe in something for nothing, that's why. Okay. Now, am I knocking parents who give allowances? No, I'm not knocking parents who give allowances. That's me, Mike Baker. I don't believe in allowances, and it's okay if I don't believe in allowances. But if you're gonna give kids an allowance, or you're gonna give money to nephews and nieces, if you're gonna give money to grandkids, if you're gonna give money to your kids, make sure that there's the occasion where, like Christmas or birthdays, you're gonna give money, all right? Don't give money so often they expect it. B, don't make it so obscene that they're like, oh, well, I know where the money bags are, you know, I'm gonna suck up to this relative, or this friend, okay?
Don't
Always,
give it to them anytime they need it.
well, yeah, make sure it's a random gift, okay? But allowances, you know, when you start paying your kids for doing stuff around the house, they're not chores anymore. It's a job, okay? Are you teaching your kid anything by giving them a job in the house? Yeah, that they don't have to go anywhere else outside of your pocketbook to get their money. Keegan?
And that also teaches them about how, because when they get out of the house, they're like, oh, well, I should be getting paid for this stuff, like doing my own dishes or making my own bed or something.
Yep. Which moves us to the next one. How many people have known kids or parents who pay for grades or get paid for grades? Yes. Believe it or not, it is a phenomenon. Okay? Good idea, bad idea. You know what the premise was? The premise was they're gonna get paid for a job when they leave the house. I should teach them that working hard earns dollars, so they understand that now. On the surface, okay, how about this? On the surface, if you were to read communism, the definition of communism all by itself, it looks fine on paper. Does it work? No. Is it evil? Pretty much. But on paper, it looks great to somebody who's never lived in that kind of agenda. All right. Same with my kid is going to have a job. Okay. Well, you've already taught him that he can't ever do any better than that, than working for somebody else. And I should pay him. Well, I can guarantee you that now there is $1 attached to everything that kid does. Now, I had a friend who I warned about that in the beginning. And sure enough, now that kid won't do anything for anybody unless there's $1 attached to it.
There's a heart issue with that kid though.
But that was part of it. My point is when he was young, I said this would happen. Now that he's older, that's exactly what he does. And yes, he does have heart issues because the training was flawed throughout. Okay. All right, a job. There seems to be a mixed review on what parents think about jobs for kids and what kids think about getting jobs. Should kids have jobs?
Depends on how, like, old, I guess, to
Why?
a certain extent. Like, well, most places Well, I mean, I guess there is a lot of places that would hire you if you're 10, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Most places that kids want to work won't hire them until, you know, at least 15.
But does that mean there are no jobs available?
No.
I think it's
No.
good for them to have to scrounge and have to mow Kathy's lawn or.
Yeah.
Teaches them to be thinking outside the box.
Yep.
It's great.
Now, in the No Debt, No Sweat book, he actually advises it. He doesn't, okay, one thing I appreciate about Diggs when he goes through his book is he doesn't present something without saying, I'm not saying this is for your family. But he will give a very strong opinion in what he thinks, and then he'll say, but it's really up to the family. Okay, and I do appreciate that. However, he does not believe that kids should have jobs. That's the direction he leans in the series, because he goes through the whole, it's been proven that they need rest and they need this. You know what? I need rest too. But if I'm gonna make my dreams and my goals a reality, then I'm gonna lose some sleep, I'm gonna lose some time, I'm gonna get my rear end up at 3 a.m. every morning, which I've been doing because I got things I gotta get done. And how am I gonna teach my kids any different if I'm like, no, it's okay, Johnny, you just sleep a little longer. No. And that's not happening in my house anyway. Okay. So job, I'm going to teach it from up here that a job is absolutely essential for a kid. Teaches them responsibility, teaches them time management, teaches them budgeting. Right? Now right now Keegan's looking for a job. I'm just gonna use an example, I'm not picking on you. Okay, Keegan's looking for a job. Why are you looking for a job, Keegan?
Money. Need money.
The money is getting low. I allowed him to quit his last job due to scheduling, okay? But it wasn't that he wasn't willing to go. Now, we're in a different area, he's got to find another job, and he will. Why? How do I know that if he wants money, he's gotta find another job? Anybody wanna guess?
Because you're
Not
not
gonna
gonna
give it
pay
to
me.
him.
Because I'm not giving him any money.
Motivated.
He's motivated, okay? I put fuel in the car that he uses because he's got college to go to twice a week. All right? And I know he's got some church functions, and that was the agreement. Anything else he wants to do, it's on Keegan. And I say that because I love him, not because I'm mean. All right? So, job, absolutely essential. Selling. Whether people want to admit it or not, selling is an absolutely essential skill that everybody needs. Everybody should learn something about selling, because there is not a part of your life that you will at some point not try to sell somebody on something. And when you're buying things and you barter or argue or debate or whatever you want to call it, negotiate the price, it's selling. All right? And unfortunately, there's a serious lack of selling skills in America. Do you know why most Americans live in scarcity? You want to know why most Americans live in scarcity? Because they're afraid to ask for something better, when they know they want something better. Asking for something better involves what, Cody?
Doing work.
Selling yourself.
Yeah.
You think that selling yourself is not a selling skill? You're wrong. It wouldn't kill everybody to read one book in their entire life on selling and sales.
I'm not recommending.
Yeah, you would. Not everybody's like that, right?
Everybody likes money.
You can do that on your everyday shopping. We went and bought a flower pot at Home Depot. It had a flaw in it. Not no big
Yeah.
deal. And we went to the cash register and said, hey, there's a flaw in this. And they said, how much you want off? That was 10%. We said, no, how about 40? And we ended up at 50% off.
There you go. Let me give you a prime.
And it wasn't no big deal, but
Yeah.
there was a flaw in it.
Yep. No, and you're absolutely right. Let's talk about the skill of selling. I got two quick stories I'm gonna tell you about selling. Those kids are bouncing around up there. Okay, so first story. When I was first teaching Brenda to barter, because her folks didn't, that was the one thing I learned, bartering. Yeah, when my folks actually taught me to barter. So we were at a yard sale. I was trying to teach her about bartering. There was a stroller there because, as I recall, you were pregnant, weren't you? So we were looking at strollers. I said, hey, I remember the stroller was $10, and I said offer them 3. And she looked at me like I had just ripped her arm off and beat her with it. I'm not gonna offer him that. I said, just offer him $3. The worst thing I can say, I'm not gonna do that. So I walked over, I said, you take $3 for that stroller? He's like, sold! After that, I created a monster. And now she is the one who's in there going, no, that's not good enough. Okay? Second story.
With our kids that were selling things.
Second story, yeah. The second story is, I sold my sailboat here a little bit ago, but I had a project sailboat I was looking at. Guy had $1,200 in it. Long story short, he and I bantered back, I went and looked at it and I decided not to do it, but he and I bantered back and forth. Now I have some selling skills, I've sold some things in some of the careers I've had and I was pretty good at it. When it was all said and done, I paid $200 for the boat. And he delivered it to where I was. Don't tell me selling skills are not important, okay? Alright. Just one book. I would encourage you to pick one book. Alright, next slide. We're getting down here. College. College is something you have to decide for yourself as a go or no-go. And funding, I mean, are parents really doing right by their kids paying for all their college?
No.
Is it gonna kill the kid? I mean, the agreement I have with the kids is if they wanna go to college or they wanna do something positive, they can stay in the house and I will feed them and I won't charge them rent. Now, is that a big help? You better believe it's a big help, okay? But does it take any more money out of my pocket than I was already putting out? No, it's like, look, I'm gonna give you a space and I'm gonna make sure you've got food, okay? The rest is on you. Why? Because free, and I want you to write this down. Everybody get your pen out and write this down. Free has no value. Free has no value. All right, the other thing, basics, we gotta be teaching debt as both a tool and a hindrance. In other words, explaining credit cards to kids because the credit card companies are more than happy to explain it to them, okay? If you haven't. Explaining good debt and bad debt, which we've gone over in class, and explaining what long and short-term goals are because that affects budget and finance, doesn't it? Goals and dreams can be a long-term goal, can't they? But you might have some short-term goals, like I wanna be a professional motivational speaker, but I gotta go to Toastmasters first. Short-term goal towards a long-term goal, okay? Next slide. Word about college. Does college answer your child's question about what to do with their life? How many kids have I seen go to college to go to general studies trying to figure out the answer to that question? And in 2 years, when general studies is over, they still don't have the answer, but now they've got a whole boatload of student loan debt.
Probably the majority. Well,
Yes,
maybe
no,
not a majority, but
a high number.
Yeah.
Am I gonna put a percentage to it? No, I couldn't put a percentage, but it's high.
like 90%
Well,
don't use their degree.
You know, well, yeah, there's, how many waiters have brought you food who have a master's degree in something in Bozeman?
That's
A
both.
few. Yes, Bozeman. Okay, and are they going just because someone said they should, or because one of their friends are going? It is totally okay for a kid, or an adult for that matter, to say, I'm not sure what I wanna do, I'm gonna hold for a minute. Okay, Kelton and I had this discussion. Kelton was gonna go to college and Kelton decided last minute, you know, I don't want all this debt, I'm gonna do this instead, and now he's a plumbing apprentice and he actually doesn't mind doing it. He's learning a skill, in 4 years he's gonna have a license. And if he wants to go to school at that point, he can. And he can do what you call retire your license, where you pay a fee to keep it retired. And if he ever wants to go back to it, he has a viable career that he was paid to learn. Okay? The point is think outside the box. There's more than one answer. College is a great answer. So is vocational school. So is apprenticeship. So is pursuing your dreams to whatever dream it is that you want to do. You want to travel the world? Travel the world. Who's stopping you? Heck, I've got like 6 books, I can tell you. You come to my house, I've got a library. There's a reason I have a library of books. My wife hates it, but I wanted to make sure, because they take up a lot of space. But I wanted to make sure that the boys always had references, always had the info. It was always available for people who had done it before them. All right, why is it more wise to encourage, now this is just an example, please, all right? Why is it more wise to encourage large college debt than it is to buy a new vehicle when the old one's worn out? Both are needed, both are liabilities. Okay? If you want to go buy, if your car is worn out and you want to go buy a new car, what will most people say? Ooh, better be careful of that car loan. But they will let a kid go out and take $40,000 of student loan debt in a heartbeat.
Well, I think because college is technically, if you're wise about it, it's an investment.
But what's it turn into? It is a liability in the fact that that student loan debt's got to be repaid. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but what I am saying is how many kids have you found who are burdened with student loan debt afterwards?
I think it's just poor management. Like I would say like a vehicle is automatically depreciating, but the education, even if you don't get your degree, is still adding to your asset and your marketability to any employer. So it further increases what money you should be making in line, even if you don't have a degree.
Even if you don't have your degree?
Yes, just going automatically makes you more.
I wouldn't agree with that.
That's,
Well, no, I only say that because I deal with soldiers constantly who have student loan issues. The primary reason most young people will get into the military these days is student loan repayment, because they're so burdened, and they're not finishing college has actually hindered their process rather than helped it. So that's the only reason I would disagree, if I'm misunderstanding you.
Well,
I understand what you're saying, but I might misunderstand your end.
well, I'm saying if you're taking like business classes and stuff, they look for that sort of stuff, and you can use that to negotiate your salary, even if you don't finish.
Mhm.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so it's an investment, whereas a car is not an investment unless you're trying to flip it or something.
Right. Well, the point I'm trying to make what's that?
It can be an investment depending on what you.
Well, yeah, depending on what you're, yeah, if you're a mechanic, if you're a mechanic or an Uber driver, yeah, it could be an investment. My only point with that statement is the fact that the way that we differentiate why we get into debt and why we don't get into debt, we don't want to make an excuse for debt that isn't going to benefit us. Does that make sense? Ultimately, that's what we're saying, is we don't want to make an excuse. We'll tell our kids, go take $40,000 in college loans, but we all just made the joke too that we've all been served by waiters with master's degrees because they can't find a job in their chosen field. But he's still got that student loan debt he's got to pay back, you know? So, and I've met, unfortunately, and maybe it's different, maybe Lolita's met less, but I've met a lot of people with degrees who are working minimum wage jobs who can't find a job in their field because they didn't really research it thoroughly before.
Yeah, they're not picking fields that.
And then they don't wanna move out of Montana.
Yeah,
Move down to Montana, yeah, they can find a job probably.
but I've met people in other states who don't want to move out of their areas too, you know?
True.
You know, there's, okay, engineering, is Montana big engineering, or is Bozeman a big engineering? How many engineers you run into working downtown, working around up the ski hill, working a ton, with their degrees? Well, I can't really find a job. Well, we're a little engineer dense here. Do you think about going somewhere else? But my family's here. Why did you pick engineering if you really, ultimately, didn't want to leave your family? Maybe you should have picked something more conducive. But yeah, planning. So are we still talking about budget and finance planning? Absolutely, we're still talking about it. All right?
I have a
Yeah.
comment about, are they going to going just because someone said they should?
Uh-huh.
I would say that this is a kingdom issue, because it happens a lot in the church where such and such says, oh, you shouldn't never do that.
Yeah.
And we need to be careful to train those that we're around to think for themselves and give information to what they might be asking about, but not to tell them this is the only way to do it, because
Right.
we're all so different. It's an important aspect, I think, that Christians in general should be careful about.
See, and I would agree. So, and that would be my point, going back to what Lolita and I were just talking about. I'm not saying don't go out and take out student loan debt, and I'm not saying don't go out and take out a car loan. Could both be necessary at some point? Okay. Do you know what they call a doctor who graduated bottom of the class?
Doctor.
A doctor. Do you know if your doctor graduated at the top or the bottom of his class? You don't. You don't know which guy you got. You just look at the fact they're a doctor.
Got a certificate on it.
Exactly. I would hope that guy went to school. All right? The guy who built my plane that I'm flying to Hawaii in or I'm going somewhere else, I would hope that guy went to school to learn what he learned. All right? So in those cases, those were their dreams. That's what they wanted to do. That's what they're going to do. They're going to take that student loan debt. All right? But then you've got somebody who's got an ailing car. Well, some people are going to need to go get a car loan because they just don't have another option. So I'm not saying don't do either, but what I am saying is you have to research and you have to plan. That's why it's called budget and finance planning. You know, and make sure that when you're encouraging other people, you're not encouraging upside down. Do this, but don't do this.
Or only what you do.
Or only what you do, yeah. Alright. Genesis 11:6, I just wanna read it right quick. The Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language. This is what they began to do, and now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. This slide's always been in there, our hopes and dreams, why aren't they there? So, why aren't we inspiring the people around us that anything is possible through our lives rather than our words? I can walk up, I can encourage somebody, right? And I should, correct? But if I live my life like I don't believe that, then the encouragement just kind of fell short. They appreciate it, they appreciate you took the time, but our lives should dictate that we honestly believe that. When we walk up and tell somebody anything's possible, they should be able to look at us and say, no, I know they do. And when they tell me that, they mean it. Good? Alright, cool. King, why don't you pray for us?
Okay. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this awesome day that you've given us. Maybe we could all come here and have this class. Please help that we can all be able to take something away from it and build your kingdom with budget and finance. Please help that the rest of our week would go well, and please help those who are traveling to be safe on their travels. In your son's name, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Is there class next week?
There is no class next week, thank you. I actually will be at drill this time. So just go ahead and go to the adult class, and we'll pick it up the next week.
I work with a lady and her son, he was like 23, he'd been in and out of college.
Yeah.
He decided he wanted to go back, so she co-signed, student loan, co-signed for him to get a student loan for $25,000.
Right.
Within a year, that was gone, and without her knowing it, he went and borrowed another $25,000 with her, I mean,
Jeez.
yeah, it was
Great.
like, of course, she'd all his life, had always paid all of his
Had done everything for him?
cell phone, car insurance, you know,